Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome. My name is Dan Bova from entrepreneur.com, and welcome to the start of summer edition of Ask Mark, where we have the chance, the privilege to pick the big brains of Mr. Marc Randolph, who's the co founder and first CEO of Netflix. He's an investor, and I'm just going to say it right here on the record, he's a damn swell guy. Mark, how you doing?
I'm well, thanks, Dan. I must say, having been introduced many times, that's the first time I've been called a damn swell guy, but I'll take it.
well,
Thanks.
well, it's true, and you can't change my mind on that, no matter how hard you try. Great to see you again. So excited! We got a lot of great questions that already came in, and I see the chat firing up from people all around the world. So if you've got a question, stick it in that chat. We'll get to as many as possible. Mark, here in New York, or in my life, it was the last day of school for my high school son. He's finished his junior year. And it made me think about how much I love an end to something. You know, when a project has an end date, for better or for worse, it's over. Do you have that sort of approach to things? Do you like that? Or do you like the idea of continually working on something?
No, I love an end date. I mean, it's a, and in fact, that feeling that your son has today, you never forget that feeling because
Yeah,
that's
right.
one of the most unbelievably unique endpoints.
Right.
That feeling like all of a sudden nothing counts anymore. You're not worried about your grade. You're not worried about this test. You're not worried about this assignment. It's like instantly all
Yes.
of this weight is lifted off your shoulders. And it's funny that when we sold Looker to Google, that was the almost the exact same feeling. Like
Mm,
the deal closed, and then almost instantly, all that pressure was
right.
gone. Worried about next quarter's numbers. Are we going to be able to hire enough sales reps? Are we going to?
Yeah.
It's a wonderful feeling. It doesn't happen very often for entrepreneurs.
Right,
Um,
right, right.
even when things go like when you have an out from an IPO or something like that, um, it just marks a moment. But then you've got to go back to the office the next day and
Right.
keep grinding against even bigger expectations. Or even when a company goes down, it isn't like you can just go brush your hands and walk away. You've got months of trying to wind it down. And so, congratulations to your son, and congratulations to any of us who've actually had that moment where you can have all of your worries erased in a single day.
Yeah, 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 that's nice, and congratulations to me because I don't have to drag him out of bed, tomorrow morning, and that's what this is all about. Um, so related to this, the first question we got, I thought was pretty interesting because it also ties to something that you had posted once, which was that, like, being a great student doesn't necessarily make being a great entrepreneur. And this person is saying that their 17-year-old high school son um, loves sports, is extremely social, but not the best test taker. She thinks that he seems someone that has like an entrepreneurial spirit, but she and he don't really know how to start on that journey. Any advice for someone like that? Gregarious
Yeah, it's
person
great.
that doesn't really know what to do with their energy?
No, it's a good question, and it is very similar to I think it might have been a LinkedIn post that I did not too long ago, which is you begin to realize that there's very, very minor correlation between how you do in school and how you do in life, or specifically how you do in entrepreneurial life. And uh, part of it is because the education system, at least in my opinion, is pretty flawed, especially in at lower levels of education, like K through 8, even K through 12. And what they do systemically is begin teaching you how to regurgitate the information that the system wants out of you, how to study for. I mean, that question, is this going to be on the test? God, that's such an awful thing, because what it does, especially now that, now people compete to get their kids in the right preschool. I mean, But it is. It's just this rat race where if you're not in the right preschool, you may not get into the right elementary school. If you don't get in the right elementary school, you may not get in the right high school. If you don't have great grades in the high school, you may not get into the right college. You may not get into the right grad school. And because of that, it just squeezes all the risk taking out of people. That they go, God, it would be really interesting to go down this path, but I know that's not that my teacher wants. Or I'm going to propose a subject, but I know that's probably not. I'm going to do something, and I have no idea. I'm going to do a science fair experiment, and I have no idea if it's going to work or not, which is so much closer to the true scientific method as opposed to doing one that's going to look good and perhaps get you noticed. So anyway, this whole thing is backwards. And entrepreneurship is almost exactly the opposite. If you are always looking for doing things that you know in advance are going to be successful, you're doomed, because otherwise you sit and study the problem for weeks or months or quarters, rather than saying, I have no idea, but then I'm curious about this, and then pursuing it. So they're not necessarily, they're certainly not correlated. And the point of that is that if you're a bad student in school, it does not mean you won't be a great entrepreneur. And being a great student does also not mean you're going to be a great entrepreneur. But, and this is a point that I made in the post, a lot of it depends on why you're a bad student. If you are a bad student, you're getting high behind the 7-Eleven every day and not going to school. If you're spending all your time hanging out, chatting with your friends, and you just don't want to put the work in, if you're lazy, I mean, there's all, yeah. If you're a lazy student, you're going to be a lazy adult, most likely.
Right.
And that's not a good sign for being an entrepreneur either, because you have to work your ass off. But the key is, the point is that if the reason that your son is not a great student is because he's constantly pursuing things on his own, and because of that is neglecting his schoolwork, it's not a bad thing at all. If he's really highly social and highly engaged and has a huge, very, very high emotional intelligence, and so school bores him, that's not a bad thing either. In other words, it's just not correlated. Don't worry about it. Just give your child license to experiment. Give them a chance to do things and fail at things. Don't put this ridiculous pressure on them on the grades. And my last thing, and I'm sorry, because it's always this danger of giving advice for a very, very deep and complicated subject, is that we live in a world where it does count. Unfortunately or not, it does count. And to the degree you can tough it out and do decently, it's going to help. Failing out is going to have repercussions. Not bothering to take an SAT prep class because you can't be bothered, and scoring 150 points lower than you ordinarily would have, that has implications. So anyway, I don't know what the answer is. Don't panic. I'll conclude by saying in college, I got an F. I got 2 Ds. I think I was a B-, C+ student in high school. I mean, I'm not an academic wizard, and I certainly did okay, but not because I did so poorly.
Right.
Just that they're not correlated.
Right. And you know what? Who knows what might have become of you if your parents had put you in the right preschool? Who knows what levels of success you could have
And
achieved.
and they did, in some sense. They moved to a really great community with a really great high school, which was listen. I had a huge privilege, and I don't deny it. One more story. I'm sorry to take the whole session about this, but it's an important thing. So one of the things I distinctly remember, besides that feeling of the weight lifted off in high school, was in college. I was a geology major, and there was a big test coming up, and I was studying, and I was reading. And I got into this geology area in the book that was fascinating. And I remember so distinctly going, this is really interesting. And I was reading and studying and reading. And simultaneously, this little voice over here was going, none of that's going to be on the test. None of that's on the test. And the other one's going, God, this is so interesting. And I went down the interesting path for 2 or 3 hours and didn't do too well on the test, but I have no regrets. Nobody, I graduated in 81. Nobody in the last 34 years has asked me, "Oh, Mark, I'm concerned about that grade you got in
Yeah.
that geology class in 1979."
Right, right.
No one gives a shit about that stuff now.
The thing I still can't get out of my system is when I'm reading a book and I could be loving every page, but I still like flip to see like how many pages I have left. It's like it's just can't deprogram myself for that.
Once an
Um,
overachiever, always an overachiever.
that's right. Um, so yeah, we mentioned, I want to get to some of these questions here, but we did mention, just since we're talking about books, we're heading into summer. I think you've got some travel on the horizons, and I'm curious, what does Mark Randolph put in his carry-on bag? Are you like digging into an 800-page book? Are you zoning out? Are you whipping out the laptop and getting to work? What's your flight routine?
Oh, interesting. So first of all, I read very few books, relatively speaking. I probably read 18 to 24 a year. So I am not a big reader of books. And when I do read books, it is largely that's my equivalent of swiping through TikTok, which is I don't necessarily want to be challenged. I want to just be taken away on a story. So that's how I think about books. Almost never read entrepreneurial books, or I just don't do that stuff. So the other thing is I love traveling because I get so much work done on planes. I don't watch movies. I don't read except on takeoff and landing. As soon as the plane levels out, I pull out my laptop and I do deep work. It's one of the only places that I know of, especially when you're flying to Europe or Asia, where you can get 11 or 12 hours where no phone calls, no
Hmm.
interruptions, no one's disturbing you. You've got a person who's willing to bring you, well, international, I'll fly business class a lot. So someone's willing to bring you a drink and bring you a snack, and you can just focus. It is unbelievably productive for me. That's where I spend most of my time. And most of the reading I do to stay current is reading the newspapers in the morning and read magazine and blog posts. So short form stuff. That's where my nonfiction reading takes place.
Excellent. All right. Well, maybe we'll try that next time. Um, Let me dig into some of these questions. We got some real businessy ones here that we could dig into. So this is an interesting one. This one comes from Ravi R. He asked, "How can we know why people are not buying our products? If it's an external factor?" He says, "We measure internal data and can't find logic in why people aren't buying or subscribing."
Well, I guess the most obvious question is to ask them.
Mm,
And I mean, and you can ask them either by doing intercept study, you can do focus group, and if it's an online thing, a really valuable one is to figure out some way to get someone to engage prior to subscribing. So, for example, um, a freemium uh, version of a product has a lot of attributes besides just funnel. It's a great way for funnel. It gets a lot of people in, they try something, and then a certain percentage of them move up to the paid version. But the huge benefit is you get to measure what parts of your product they're using, how frequently they're using it in the freemium version. And you can ask them. You can encourage them. You can reward them for giving you feedback on what they like and what they don't like. And if someone doesn't subscribe and churns off, and you have their contact information somehow, go back and ask them, call them.
mm,
Um, I used to, back when I was kind of itinerant marketing, moving from one product category to another. I would spend days sitting down in customer service taking phone calls, if for no other reason than to ask people, what do you like? What do you dislike? Why are you leaving? Why are you quitting? For a lot of CPG stuff, I've spent a lot of time in supermarkets, just hovering in the aisles and watching what people do. And when they go and they look and they don't pick up the one I want, they pick something else, I'll stop them and say, "Do you have a second? And tell me what happened there. Why did you choose that over this?" Um, it's probably the best way I can think of is just I say ask them, but it's not an okay for you to say, "But I can't ask them. I have no contact." So figure out a way to make contact with them. Engineer your product in a way that you do have contact pre-sale.
Mm.
Figure out a way to meet them where they live, and ask.
I mean, one of the things that I think that's important to note here is that I think some people we're hiding behind a computer, like talking to someone in a supermarket. Are you crazy? They're gonna think I'm nuts. Like, do you think people get too caught up in that aspect of it, whether it's being introverted or just feeling like that's like people are gonna freak out if I approach them?
Absolutely. It's not a
Yeah.
natural you're right. It's a very unnatural thing to walk up to someone in a supermarket and say, "Why did you pick that product?" Or, uh, or even if your product's not out yet, is going up to someone. I used to call it the Starbucks test, where you go up and offer to buy someone a coffee if they'll spend 2 minutes talking to you about something and showing them something on a screen. It's weird,
Yeah.
but it's like anything you do, which is a little bit unnatural, is it's way more scary in your head than it is in real life.
Right. Right. Right.
By and large, people are nice. By and large, people wanna be helpful. By and large, people love it when you ask their opinions about things. It's just pushing past that. And, again, using Looker as an example, as you did earlier in the segment, I kind of when I before I did Looker, I had never ever worked for a company done a company where we sold face to face. It was all sold online. I was very, very, very comfortable with that manner. And all of a sudden, when we had real customers with real people who needed to be spoken to, it did require a little push for me to get out and meet with clients and understand what the problems were and what the issues were, and call them up and say, "Well, I understand you're, not considering, going with someone else. Tell me what it is we could have done differently." And it's a great way to learn.
Yeah. So we got a question here that kind of
One
dovetail.
one more, Dan. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
this is not necessarily related to that question, but a lot of times when people get turned down by a VC, which happens, a million times a second around here in this audience, is go back and ask what happened.
Uh,
Don't go back and try and change their mind, and make it really clear that you would love 5 minutes on the phone, not to change their mind, but you want to
yeah.
understand what you could have done differently. What were
Mm,
they looking for? What were you missing? Where was
yep,
the hole? And
yep.
again, you won't always get an answer, but you don't need to get an answer always. You just need to get an answer a little bit.
So, that's great. I love that, and it takes a little courage, but I think it's great, and it dovetails into this question that Dawson Walters sent in here. Says, "I've been rejected a couple of dozen times in selling. They say sell yourself, but I feel gross. Maybe I take things too personally. Maybe I'm disorganized. How can I change my mindset?"
So tell me the very first sentence of that question again.
It says, "I've been rejected a couple of dozen times in
Oh,
selling."
yeah.
And, I guess if Dawson feels, too gross, pumping themselves up as they're selling.
Uh, yeah. Sorry. But it's true is that, and it's very common, but and I assume we're talking about selling an idea, trying to fundraise or trying to get a customer to buy the product. Um, if it's purely product focused, you can do it without any human intervention at all. And there's lots of, I mean, anyone who's bought Optimizely or bought, some kind of online product, it's 100% sold online. There's no person involved in selling it there. So it is very possible to do it without you being involved. So I'm assuming you're talking about something that does require a face-to-face interaction, an expensive SaaS product, something which is not yet on the market. And you're trying to convince someone to be a design partner. You're trying to raise money. And the reality is that that is the case. The idea counts this much and you count this much. I can't, there I go, that much. Um, And so you do have to sell yourself. But listen, you're not selling all of yourself. Whatever the term, that I'm a general all around good guy or something like that. Who cares? All they really care about is, are you going to be a reliable partner, either in supporting the product or as a design partner or as an entrepreneur I invest in? Are you reliable? And are you going to make this happen? Can I? That's what I care about the most. I am evaluating you, and I'm sorry. So uh, it's just swinging your presentation to make sure you accentuate those facts. And what you may be feeling in these rejections isn't that you're sloppy or whatever the word that you're using. It's that you just haven't given anyone any real confidence that you can pull this off. And part of it might be looking internally and going, I got to realize that what I have to do is gain the experience to demonstrate that I can pull this off. Or you've got to dredge up the things in your background that will support the fact that, yes, you can pull this off. But I guess the tough love here is there's no avoiding it. So you may as well learn how to get good at it.
Yeah, and Mark, you teed me perfectly up to say you are the star of our show, Entrepreneur Elevator Pitch, and the new season premieres next week. So I want to encourage everyone. You could watch how Mark analyzes entrepreneurs and their pitches, who he believes in and who he doesn't. But you believe in everyone, right, Mark?
I do. I love every idea that I hear. But I will say that this last season, season 11, I believe it is,
Yeah.
that we did, is, both Kim Perrell and I agree this was the best season ever. So some great guest investors and some really great entrepreneurs. I can't wait to see how they take
I've seen
hours and
some. I've
hours and
seen some
hours of
episodes.
stuff.
It's pretty great, and that premieres not next week. It's June 26th, and everyone can check that out on entrepreneur.com, Entrepreneur TV, and YouTube, and all kinds of other places. All right, let's get to some more questions here. So this one came in, and you touched on this earlier. This is from Diego Flores. Was talking about a subscription version that has a freemium version, but he asks, how do you transition people to pay? What's a way that you do it without feeling like you just like pulled the rug out from under them?
That is the entire design in any type of multi-price product. Where, for example, you've seen that little box, those little panels, and on the left it goes free, and here's the three things you get, and then 19.95, and get those three plus you get these two more, and then 99.95 you get all those five plus these next three. That is everything.
Hmm.
It is designing it so that every tier, each price point you move through, has a very clear, a singular, clear, unique reason to want to move. You're not doing a bait and switch. You're basically saying up front, here's what you get in the free version. But if you pay the $9.95, you now get this. And this has to be very, very clearly thought through. And more
Right.
importantly, it is not static, it's dynamic. You are constantly testing and trying and using different price points. And what's fascinating is that you'll learn how to steer people into what tier you want them to based on using things like variable pricing and pardon me, relative pricing. And there's a lot written about this, so I won't go into it. But for example, if you go, here's the free, and this one's $1.99, and this one's 99. Well, what a surprise. They'll go to the $1.99. Or you take the middle tier and move it closer to the 99. Now people will jump up one. There's all kinds of interesting studies on this. It's a fascinating
Yeah.
part of using freemium product and of using these multi-price point SaaS type products.
I mean, who among us has been to the movie theater and didn't pay a quarter extra for the giant bucket of Coke instead of
It's exactly that
yeah.
principle. And you can tell I kind of get excited about it. It's one of the most fun things about doing a product like that has multiple price points, multiple feature sets, and experimenting with how you position things. I love it.
That's awesome. Well, we got a question that's in all caps, so I feel like I have to answer this. I asked this from Nicholas. How to prevent burnout? All caps, Mark.
Yeah, I've used the example multiple times that the whole people always go, "Oh, it's not a sprint; it's a marathon." Well, not really. It's more like a, I don't know, these obscure examples, like a ride and tie, where sometimes you're on a horse, sometimes you're sprinting, sometimes you're jogging, sometimes you're going through mud, sometimes you're going uphill, sometimes you're going downhill. Uh, it's different all the time.
Yeah.
So, holistically, you have to pace yourself. And the trick, and I think I've written about this one too recently. So if you haven't read my writing, you can go to my website and sign up to get every week, and you won't miss nuggets like this. But
What's that? What's that website? Markrandolph.com. There it is. Yeah.
which is all lowercase, by the way, as you can see, which is in good contrast to the all uppercase questions. But what I said is that you've got to measure yourself. You've got to change your metric. Yes, you have to have some balance in your life to avoid burnout, but your metric doesn't need to be daily. You don't need to say, oh, every day I get 3 hours where I go off and go for a run and work out and have a date with my wife. And listen, if you're a startup, it's just not reasonable. So maybe you got to shift your framework and you go, all right, over a course of a week, I work like a dog for 3 of those days, and then I kind of take it easy the fourth, and then really I recover. I don't work on the weekends, or maybe that's not reasonable. So now set your framework as a month. Listen, I've got a big push. I've got to fly to Europe. I've got to nail down who our European distributor is going to be. I've got to meet with some big customers. I'm going to be like for 3 weeks completely ragged. I had better, when I get back, have a pretty clear calendar to let me catch up on my long-term thinking. And I better make sure I take a day or two off to recover. Listen, and sometimes, especially when you're in your 20s and just starting out, you may have to set that calendar as a quarterly measurement or an annual measurement but you absolutely had better, whatever measurement framework you put in place, make sure you've allocated time for yourself. Make sure you've allocated time for other things that are important to you, whether that's your family, whether that's your friends, whether that's your personal self. Um, it's important. It's probably the most important thing. It's what I think about more than almost anything else.
Mm,
Is how am I doing in the balance category? And even though I'm now kind of at the tail end of my entrepreneurial career, I still think about it almost all the time. How am I doing in keeping myself from burning out? And it's not just me. You can burn out your relationship. You can burn out your friends. You can burn out your family because you are always working and unavailable.
that's great. And Mark has written a lot about that. You just wrote a really beautiful tribute to your friendship with your wife that I read. Got a little teary eyed, Mark. Thanks for that. But no, it's really really moving. And you've talked a lot about on past episodes of this about your passion for the outdoors and just getting outside and how that refills your bucket. So whatever it is, yeah, refill your bucket for sure.
There it is.
We got a question that was sent in earlier from Bill Davis, and someone in the chat just asked this basically, which is, what does the word success mean to you? There's a lot of definitions of it, and what does it mean to Mark Randolph?
That's a it's not a it's a not a it's a great question. And the reason I'm sitting here thinking is there's really two possible ways to answer it. Um, and in a minute, I'll say what success means to me. And Dan, you already know the answer because I probably mentioned it here several times. Um, but a more generalized success. First of all, it's not about money and stuff like that. That's pretty obvious. At least I think it's pretty obvious. Too many people have correlated entrepreneurial success as being, did you exit? Did you make a lot of money? Did you do a lot? And yeah, I guess to some small degree, that's considered success. It certainly is what your investors would consider success. I don't consider that success, only because that gets you into that same boat that we were talking about with high school kids. Is then you begin saying the only thing worth doing is something which has potentially large outcome, and that's no fun. So to me, the more generalized version of success is I've always said that one of the things I'm luckiest about is I figured out pretty early on in my life, my late 20s, early 30s, I figured out these two important things. I figured out what I'm really good at, and I figured out what I love doing. And I've gotten to spend my whole life doing those things. Which is early stage entrepreneur stuff, starting and building companies. I love doing that. And modestly, I kind of realized I, for whatever reason, have some of the skill set that makes me good at it. And being able to spend your life doing this thing that you love doing and that you're pretty good at, oh my God, I can't imagine a more successful life for me. But that doesn't mean it's just because I did happen to have the fact that I had big exits is why I'm here, but it's not why I consider myself successful. I had just as much enjoyment out of starting the ones that didn't get to the size that got huge and successful. I got just as much that was successful as getting to come to work every day and sit around the table with these really smart people solving really interesting problems. That's success. But I will give you the narrower one just for sake of continuity here and it's the preceding question was about this, how do you avoid burnout? And I said, it's about um, balance. It's about not having work be the only thing in your life. And I also learned that when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, when I came really close to, totally compromising some of the really, really close relationships in my life with my family and with my girlfriend, who's currently my wife. And not because I was being driven to work so hard, it's because I loved working so hard. But I realized if I did that, I was going to lose. And as Dan mentioned briefly, my third thing is I love the outdoors. And I don't just mean going for a walk in the backyard. I mean, I like getting way the fuck out in the middle of nowhere and doing backcountry skiing or mountain biking or kayaking or canoeing or surfing or things you cannot do easily in an hour. And if I was going to get that to be part of my life and maintain relationships with my family and my friends and my wife, I'd have to balance. So for me, success is that I managed to start all the companies I started. I managed to make two of them hugely successful and make a number of them mildly successful. And I've done that for more than 40 years and did all that and still am married, same person. My kids, as far as I can tell, know me and like me. I still get out mountain biking and backcountry skiing and kayaking and surfing and traveling all over the world. So that, my friend, is what I consider success.
That's awesome. I love that. And for anyone who missed it, I just want to underline something. The co-founder of Netflix said he's quote pretty good at starting companies. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Well, it's funny then because it's a very, very weird dynamic because, like everybody else, I have this element of survivor bias,
Mm.
and I go, I'm not. Boy, this is kind of bizarre that I'm kind of held up as this great entrepreneur. And I go, I really don't feel like I'm not good at it. But then the other little voice over here goes, you did two multi-billion-dollar companies and three IPOs, and so you definitely did something right. And then those
Yeah.
two things pull at each
Yeah.
other all the time. It's weird.
Well, I think all of us to a much lesser degree. I don't think we all started billion-dollar companies, but I think everyone here can relate to feeling like, did I just
Yeah.
get lucky or what? But all right, let's try to get to a couple of more quick ones. Um, let's see. There was one that was just here. Um, in terms of so this comes from Mike Lee. What strategies do you employ to foster innovation within your organization or from your employees?
That's a great question. Uh, it's pretty much the same thing that I would do trying to encourage whatever behavior I want to have. And it's about the culture. And it's about, if you have certain aspects of your culture you think are important, the most important thing is to walk the walk and model the behavior.
Mm.
So the biggest thing that I could possibly do to encourage innovation within an organization is to celebrate it when I see it. Um, culture, as I've said this a million times, but it does bear repeating, is that it's not aspirational. It's not what you put on your break room wall. It's observational. It's how you behave. And certain things speak louder than others. Who you fire, who you hire, who you reward. So you had better walk the walk. And I'll give you an example of this. Has happened so many times. I do a lot of keynote speaking. I travel all over the world, big 5,000 person conference. Usually it's, everyone there. And the CEO takes me aside beforehand and goes, gosh, Mark, okay, the theme this quarter is innovation. I've got to get this organization to be more innovative. We've got to take more chances, more risks. You're here to send the message that innovation is important. But before you go on, we're going to celebrate our sales leaders. And they're saying one thing, but they're doing another. They're paying lip service to innovation. But what they're really saying, we're taking the people who actually make the most money for the company and sending them on vacation, and not mentioning anything about the 500 other people who took big risks and really tried to innovate and it didn't work. So that's what you can do. When you have a company meeting, every single company meeting, when you have everyone gathered there, bring someone up and reward them for having taken a risk, for trying to innovate. And then people begin to realize, not only does Mark say innovation is important, he models it. Be transparent in your own behavior. Get up and say, I'm going to do something. We're going to do something this next couple of weeks. I have no idea if it's going to work, but we're going to try something because this is how innovation works. And they see that what you're saying matches what you're doing. It's easy when you have 10 people. It's not that bad at 100. It's very hard at 1,000.
Yeah.
It's extremely hard at 10,000, but the behavior is exactly the same. You've got to walk the walk.
That's great. We got this question in earlier. Now, I haven't verified that this is from them, but this question came in from Mr. T. And the question was, do you pity the fool?
Pity the fool. Absolutely. Mr. T, he'll never be forgotten. But
Yeah,
he kind of cemented the idea of there being an A team, and
that's true.
and that people from all different backgrounds and experience can come together to make the A team.
That's
So
right.
good to hear from you, Mr. T.
Yeah, we'll try to hook you guys up after the show. So let's get to, one of the things that you recently posted was a handwritten note from your dad when you said when you were 21, you were just starting off in the world. It was kind of a list of things he was encouraging you to do. And I'm wondering, everyone could find that article on Mark's website, on his social media and LinkedIn. But are there any points from that really stick with you, that you like, that echo in your head more than others?
Yeah, and first of all, just to give background to people, which is that, this is the day before my first job.
Mm.
And my dad called me into the den where he was sitting there and he had a yellow pad and he had written longhand his Randolph's Rules of Success. And he tore it off and gave it to me and said, you're starting your work career. I thought I'd jot down some of the things that I've learned over my career. And I still have them. They're framed. They're hanging in my bathroom where I see them every morning. And so, yes, they're meaningful. And I'll answer it two different ways here. Number one is that these Randolph Rules of Success, which, by the way, you can find in my book, which I can't point to because it's backwards. Here it is. That will never work. Number one was shamelessly plug people. No, so there they are. They're in the book. But what these are is not things like, buy low and sell high and happiness is positive cash flow or any kind of business bullshit. Basically, they said, be a decent person.
Mm.
That's what these were. Be a mensch. That's what gets you ahead in life. And probably the one that resonates the most, which is that number 2, which is never ever to anybody present as fact opinions on things you don't know.
Mm.
And the world is full of so much bullshit
Mhm.
that if you can gain this reputation as being someone who only speaks about things especially, God, if we're looking what's happening in our political arena, it's so refreshing to have someone who actually limits their remarks and their criticisms to things they actually know something about and
Yeah.
base them on fact.
Yeah.
And I've tried my best to do that, as I've done during this whole session today.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. Well, as Mark mentioned, that's in his book. That Will Never Work. Definitely worth a read. And Mark's website, markrandolph.com. We're coming to the end here, Mark. We're gonna head into summer. So, for everyone on this call, well, first of all, thanks for being here. But Mark, I wonder if you could give us all a little summer homework, not a summer reading list per se, but some kind of summer challenge. Let's give ourselves a deadline of, say, August 31st. Like, I want everyone on the call to do this.
Oh boy, that's a tough one, Dan. I mean, to be honest, my instinct is to go take it easy.
Yeah.
as the
Okay. All right.
as the question came back about how to avoid burnout, take it easy. Listen, some of the biggest businesses in the world are in Europe, and they friggin' take off 5 or 6 weeks a year. They take off a month every summer, and it certainly hasn't hurt Germany's competitiveness
Right. Right.
over the decades. You don't need to do everything right.
Mm,
Here's my homework: take some time off. Put your phone away.
mm.
See if you can spend 48 hours in a row, 72 hours in a row without looking at your phone. Tell people you're going off the grid. Just put things in perspective. There's some homework. I want you to do that twice between now and August 1st, is do a 72 hours off your phone. And if you can do better than that, if you can do a whole week, if you can get away for 2 weeks, if you can sit in and not start your day until 11 every Friday, pick some meaningful objective and let's see if we can all relax a little bit.
That is the greatest answer I've ever heard in my entire life. So thank you for that. That is great. In the grind, porn we hear all the time. It's a welcome relief to hear. So thank you so much, Mark, for doing this for this whole year. We're going to take some time off. We'll be back in the fall. In the meantime, everyone can check out markrandolph.com. Of course, check out Mark and Kim Perrell and our other great judges on Entrepreneur Elevator Pitch, which is going to premiere on June 26th. Mark, anything else you want to send anyone off with? Any parting words?
No, I think this has been great, Dan. Thanks for moderating, and thanks to everybody for all your great questions. Sorry I couldn't get to them all. You're welcome to send me a note at markrandolph.com. I'm a little backlogged a little bit now, as I apologize, but I do eventually respond to almost everything. And hang in there, have fun, and take it easy. Relax a little bit.
And of course, pity the fool.
Pity the fool.
All right. We'll see you again soon, everybody. Have a great summer.
Thanks, Dan.